of James, starting in chapter 4. We'll be reading together from about verse 13 through the 6th verse or so of chapter 5. Before we begin our study, let's go ahead and do our best to move our hearts into worship with prayer. And after that prayer, we'll start our study and reading together. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time we share in spiritual things. We thank you for the wisdom that is offered to us. Help us as followers of Jesus to pay close attention to the inspired word. Help us to be good listeners, good learners, and effectual doers. It is important for us as we develop our faith to not only properly understand your will, but our heart's desire is to follow you with wholeness. Forgive us of our sins, and we offer this prayer in your Son's name. Amen. All right, so as noted, we are in James. This is two parts of some pride reevaluation sections where there's a challenge for all of us to have a sense of, I know how things will be. I know what my place is in a world that sometimes sells us that same idea. And God, through James, and God, through the life of Christ, and through the work of the disciples, is trying to confront this presumption we have about tomorrow is. The Bible, in a broad sense, tries to help us understand the frailty of human existence, the folly of thinking beyond a very heavenward view. And some of the parables talk about this of Jesus, specifically ones that would be things like counting the cost, or how you value riches, and like how you accumulate stuff and things. And so some of that gets addressed here. Some of the concepts and principles will be discussed in this area. Secondly, we'll also be thinking about how those two ideas, that idea of our presumptions about tomorrow's inevitability and misuse of God's blessings, intersect not only with James's message, but that other edge of how it connects to Galatians in the law side of things. But also the struggle to switch from our reading of a first century letter written to first century Christians who have to figure out in the 21st century which parts of these are cultural, which parts of these are God telling us, which parts of these are people properly understanding culture or not catching it. The Gospels are full of things like that. Even the letters sometimes deal with unique situations that are contextually just about that church. Even Paul, in his letter to the church of Corinth, uses an aside method where he says, not I, but the Lord, or the Lord, not I, that model. And so it's wisdom then applied to figure these things out. And so we'll think about that some too. We'll start with paying attention now to verses 13 through 17. And Trey, do you want to read for us? This is in James chapter 4.
Come now, you say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin.
Broad question. And this is not about your work life. This is about your spiritual life, your day-to-day life, your I'm going to go make money choices. How many of you have ever sat down and thought about what will life be like in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years? Do you guys think about the future like that? Wonder about all those kind of things? How many of you take those wonderments and write them down? I write stuff down, mostly because I forget things. That's also where, if you wonder what I write about, it's because I thought about it 2 years ago and I wrote it down. I said that was a good idea or a bad idea, and I wrote it down somewhere. It's a holdover of some of my early collegiate experiences to have annual plans following 5-year plans. I want to know. I want to plan. Is there a risk there, though? Yeah, because I can look at my notes, and I guarantee you I am wrong about the future far more often than I am correct. Like, just universally true. And I'm not talking, by the way, of big things. I'm talking about small, valuable relational things, important contextual bits about my life that I thought were going to go a certain way, and it would have made sense for them to go that way. And these are not also, by the way, things that are truly positive, negative, like good and like it's just different. Like, I didn't plan that. This turned out this way. This is also good or interesting. And there's also a lot of things that I planned out really good and they're really bad. Like, I planned it one way, did not go that way at all. I think what James is in part getting at is pushing at our presumption that we can control things. That we just absolutely believe that we have absolute control over each day. Even though we intellectually acknowledge that we don't. And it can go down to really small things. When you go to a restaurant and you have to wait longer than you expect to wait, what does your mood do?
Change.
Do you get happier when you have a long wait at a restaurant?
No.
Let's think about our brain, emotionally I agree. That's how I feel too. Like, especially if the maitre d' goes, it's going to be a 15-minute wait. I used to work in the industry. 15-minute means 20 to 25 minutes, but they say 15. I know how the math works. But when it starts getting longer, I get frustrated. Maybe because I'm hungry, maybe not. But I want you to think about this. Why do we go to a restaurant? What is our purpose there? This is helping us kind of change our view of control.
To eat.
To eat. So we're going to eat eventually. Usually it's also a social time. We go eat mostly with other people. And when we get to the table, the waitresses, the waiters, they're more concerned with a different thing. What do they want you to do at the table?
Eat and go.
Order, eat, tip, out. Like that, like as fast as possible. It's turnover. They want to make money. That's their job. But what do we end up doing? We talk, we chat, we have an experience, we're talking. They start staring at us. They start aggressively bussing the table. They might send the busboy over there and start polishing the table for the next person because you're decreasing their hourly wages. Like, they're not making money when you're sitting there. But we complain when it doesn't go the way we wanted. But if we're afforded the privilege of staying longer, we get excited about it. Presumption of control functions in a world where you're the center, when everything's about you. When you realize that it's not, you have the potential to maybe relax a little bit. For those of us who are high structure, high organization, like A goes to B, goes to C, goes to D, that's not easy, but that's part of what James is trying to get us to handle, to accept that part of it. And, most specifically, undo the pride, the arrogance that says you do really know. Because in context, like, we're going to go do this, we're going to make a profit, we're going to have it go this way, and it's just going to be perfect. And it never is, at all. But there's some importance there, because he'll shift from that to how fragile life is. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. He uses an interesting word, that life is a mist, a vapor. Visible one moment, gone the next. It's pulled from the imagery of the Psalms. It's pulled from the imagery of the wisdom literature. Ecclesiastes uses a similar word. that's been brought into Greek here. That life isn't this kind of thing. Now, one of the things I think is important to catch is he's not just talking about the brevity or the shortness of life. This term is actually helping us understand that our life that we think is all about substance and physicality and what we can touch, taste, or own is the wrong perspective. Your life is actually something entirely different. And this word hints at the spiritual nature of humanity. That you and I, as human beings, are more than goods, more than gaining power or agency. We're actually those who are now in submission to a God who controls those things. That's why the phrase in verse 15 goes, if the Lord wills. That's a powerful thing. If the Lord makes this possible. Local churches actually get to deal with this all the time in a unique way. I want you to answer the question as honestly to yourself as you can and say, what makes a local church grow? Is it the quality of the preaching? Does the quality of the preaching have a part in it? We feel that way. I feel that way. I don't want bad preaching. I don't want to provide bad preaching and teaching. But if I'm going to go as a biblicist, as a restoration mindset, what does the New Testament say causes the growth of a local church? God does. The Lord does that. So that means that how much control do you or I actually have on it? Like actual full control on the growth of a local community of Christians.
Well, we have some because we're supposed to spread the word, spread the seed, and
So-
God gives the increase.
There's a distributive level of I've got to do my part, but in the end the Lord does the increase, like whatever that is. So a growing congregation grows because the Lord says that place is going to go right now, in part. Can I cause the local church to have trouble and die off? So I could be a negative cause. And yet, submissive planning says, if the Lord wills. If the Lord is okay with this. If it's part of his plan. When shepherds talk about the future of a local church, they have to then live in that world. When you and I, as members of a congregation, talk about the future of a local church, we also do have to submit and say, the Lord wills. This is what we think will happen. And be okay with it. Being okay with uncertainty is hard. We like to know things that are like going to fill out the ledger and the spreadsheet from Excel is going to just match up just right. And we're have all the parts we need when we open the box to build the thing. But that's not how it works. In fact, there is two things that James ends this section with that are super important. Thing number one, this attitude itself is something that is of the devil. And in a rare sense, similar to what's said over in 1 John 2, verse 16, it's categorically evil. That's a hard thing to accept. But I know how this is going to go. I just know. Unfortunately, you don't. You might have a very good sense of what the possible outcomes are, and very likely you could be right because of experience. But again, there's a boundary on it. There's a boundary that is there. And I think at least the reason for the boundary is to reassert our submission to God. It's not that we might be right or wrong. It's that we have to realize that we are not ourselves in control of the outcome. Even though we like to act like we are. Even though we believe that this is the way it is. Have you ever watched someone learn how to shoot a firearm before? Every time someone's learning how to shoot a firearm, they believe it's going to function a certain way. But every time you pull the bang stick goes bang, right? Is that how it actually works? Does sometimes the bang stick do random things? It does. And they teach you how to maybe clear a stovepipe ejection. Or somehow or another, the casing of the bullet, through gymnastics I can't yet understand, repeatedly occurs where it just goes back into the ejection port and just sits there. I don't know how it happens. But everyone I know who has fired a modern semi-automatic firearm has had at least one of those occur. Like it just happens. Oh, and by the way, it can happen in bolt actions. It can happen in your old rifle that's never misfired before. And it misfires in a weird way. And not only that, when you clear it by pulling back the bolt and you ram it forward to land the next round into it, at an angle, it manifests. That's why they train you almost always in the lead up to learn how to do it, that every firearm is what? Loaded. Even if you have personally pulled every bullet and component out of it, it's still loaded because a bullet could magically crawl up the rifle and find its way into the chamber. That's a real thing. Like, I don't know how it happens, but that's a real thing. There's 4 safety rules, etc., that you would learn in that process because we don't understand. We don't have the capacity to forecast the future. And this is a categorically evil behavior, is to believe that it is. To believe that we know. To believe that we have that level of certainty. Further, and you catch this in the last verse, and this is an interesting addition, verse 17. So whoever knows to do the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. It's like the next step on it. We tend to take that verse and make it be like the label for all things. Here it is. If you know the right thing and not do it, boom, this is a thing. But in context, this is an admonition that follows what he just said. It says, look, you now know the right thing. Plan your life submissive to God. And now because you know that, if you don't do it, then that itself becomes rebellion to God. By the way, it doesn't mean the other application isn't true, but that's the secondary use of the text. If you want like comparative passages in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, that's the rich fool who made all his elaborate plans without consulting God what the future would be. Or in the letter of Galatians, in Galatians 5:26, and chapter 6 and verse 3, where Paul warns us against self-deception and conceit. I think then maybe on the application side, we could balance it this way. The Bible routinely tells us that we should plan for the future. Count the cost. Consider your soul. But boasting in those plans reveals our foolishness. We've got to get somewhere to where the phrase, if the Lord wills, is an actual conviction, not just a little trite phrase. Well, if the Lord wills, is different than saying it with deep meaning. If the Lord wills, this is what we believe will happen. And we realize that the Lord has more control over these things than we do, but this is what we see. This is what I see for me when I think about what my future might look like. This is what God sees for us. And it probably is different than what I see. So, thoughts. Given that James 4:14, with that imagery of life being a vapor or a mist, how does that tear against our culture's got to have a long-term plan view of things? Didn't they recently talk about having really, really long mortgages? Yeah. The financial planning side of my brain goes, those are dumb. Like, they're just so dumb. Mathematically dumb. Is that general consensus for everybody? That's knowing that there's been inflation and knowing that the math is different and knowing that it's difficult to build up the equity in the current market space to move into a home for a lot of peoples. Well, that math is like turning the joke that the mortgage is a death gauge. That's a mortgage joke. It's not actually what the term kind of comes from to a certain degree. But it feels like you're going to buy this place and die before you pay it off. Because statistically, that can happen to a lot of folks at that longer date. But really, how much does it matter?
It doesn't. They tell you, you probably stay in that home 5, 6, 7 years before you get transferred with your job, so they don't care as long as they can.
That's a very Atlanta thing. Everyone in Atlanta might get transferred from somewhere out to Atlanta, and if you're not, then you're the outlier, statistically speaking, to have stayed in one area more than 5 or 7 years in Atlanta. You look at East Side right now, on our Sunday morning or our Wednesday night group, it's different people. So, and I've been here about 7 years than when I came here. And some of you are the same, and some are different. That's normal. That's part of it. There's part of a component in it, but there's also another component that's tied into there, which is really important. It kind of jumps to the next text. Our desires about those things have changed too. How many of you have been to the home that your parents grew up in? I've been to that house. What does that house look like compared to any place in Coweta County that you personally would go by today? Are those homes bigger or smaller? Smaller. You could still go to the house that my dad grew up in and purchase the sand that it was built on. The foundation is there. The outside of the house is still there. The interior has been stripped of its value and reused in other properties in the area because nobody lives in Trona anymore. It's just mathematically there's no reason to it. I think it came up for sale about 15 years ago for $9,000 because that was the worth of the stuff inside. If you want to live in Trona, California, next to the really smelly mine. Like you could smell Trona from about 60 miles away. You start smelling its existence. Nobody wants to live there. No jobs. There's no agency, no opportunity. But that house was incredibly small. I think it was about 650 square foot for a family of 6. 4 boys, 2 twins in the middle, spread in age by a total of 5 years. Well, and 5 years was barely 5 years. It'd probably be easier to say like 4 and change. And if you can imagine 4 boys that were doing all the things boys could do, and they did all the things, and their punishment was basically to go rake the sand. And so that was the context. So our needs have changed, our wants have changed. This has a lot to do with helping us understand, hey, what's really important and why these things matter. Let's scoot forward just a little bit now and think about one more text. This is from James chapter 5, starting in verse 1. Carson, you want to read for us? 1 through 6, please.
Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last of days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you.
So, first question, what does this part of James sound like? If you're going to say another part of the Bible. Matthew chapter 6. And what was Jesus talking about there in Matthew 6? Who was he also kind of quoting as well? So this is pulling from Jesus. Does it sound like the minor prophets at all? or Ezekiel and Israel's condition then too. One of the most poignant phrases from the Old Testament that I remember because it's the humorous speech of the prophets. You fat cows of Bashan. When you see, our neighborhood is overridden with very large rats with antlers, otherwise known as deer. And we've got one buck in particular who's probably got the most urban spread, like urban rack I've seen. It's got to have 8 or 9 points. It's wide because there's no narrow pathways that it's been beating his head through over the years. And our neighborhood is all abuzz with that's everyone's new thing, is who's going to get it. There's like a 400-yard plot next to our neighborhood. Someone's going to get it. It won't be one of the ones in the neighborhood, I'm sure, because they're all concerned that they'll get caught taking the deer in the neighborhood. But it's looking like it's ready to take. It's not going to feed anybody. But there are some does that got some meat on them. This is a mast deer for our part of the neighborhood, and so the acorns are dropping like crazy. And the squirrels and the deer have given up eating them. There's too many of them. So if you want some, we can go to our front yard. We got tons of them. They're probably not good. But that's fat cow. Let's take it. That's the image that comes from the prophets, is saying you made yourself fat off of the abuse of others. In Matthew 6, Jesus pulls from that imagery and preaches it to the audiences of the first century and saying, hey, this is what's going on. The unfortunate reality is James has to say it again to an audience that includes Christians. Because this is not just broadcast message for all the people. James is written to those who believe that Jesus is the Christ. That means that some of the things that are said there are things that a Christian needed to think about. So roll your brain back for a moment and think about just the opening refrain. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. You ever heard the phrase, that's a first world problem? What's that mean? What's it mean if it's a first world problem?
It's not a big problem.
It's not, but we act like it is. My internet went out. Oh, it's the end of days.
It's typically a problem of convenience.
Of convenience, yeah. I had to wait for my coffee. There was 4 people in front of me, and the person in front of me had a list of 15 coffees they were ordering. Why couldn't they use the app and just have it be ready for them? The first world problem, right? And I'm exaggerating a tiny bit. But look inside yourself. How many of you have complained when you've gone to, let's say, Home Depot, and you're looking for that one light bulb, and the entire shelf of light bulbs that you want is gone? How could they not have the logistics in place to have a light bulb? They should know I need this light bulb. Clearly, it's a very, what was that?
I have a theory.
You have a theory. Clearly, this is a really important light bulb because everyone else is buying it. They should have more of these on hand to know that there's a run coming. I think their system had a bad day. Or Rich can tell us the real answer later. This is something I think that touches the edge of that. But you have to realize that if God in the first century has James write this to Christians who include individuals who would need to hear this, shouldn't we pay close attention? Because maybe we live in a world that's not that different than that. Does that hurt a little bit to think about he's writing it to me? After you pay your bills, do you feel poorer, or at least poorer? Paying bills, man, makes me feel poorer than I think I actually am. But I live in the wealthiest nation on the planet. Most of the time, my heat functions. Every now and then, it has a little vacation. But I'm a bear, I'm fine. I've got food. I got a roof, even through storms. And yet, I sometimes feel poor. And yet, God says on the other end, you who are rich, weep and howl, their miseries are coming upon you. Now he asks the question, why does he warn them so harshly? What have they done with their wealth, both contextually above this and after this? Because this follows after this plan the future business.
Part of the problem was how they had gained their wealth.
So part of it's the gain of it. What's the other part of the problem? Maybe having too much of it, although you don't need too much to be bad with it. You can be dumb with a nickel. You can be done with 10 nickels. Now, if you had gone back and watched me in the 5 and dime store as a kid and they gave me $1, I came back with $1 of candy. Because that's done with it. But I wanted candy. I had $1. It was a simple equation. It was 5. There was no complication there. Trenton?
It says in verse 3, their corrosion shows that essentially their motives have changed, their pursuits have changed. So it's changed what their desires are.
Money can create tremendous good. Money can also create tremendous evil. How you use it then becomes the outcome. And you can have a lot of blessings given to you and treat them like trash and be corroded on the inside. You can also have a lot of those blessings given to you and be tremendously kind and generous and helpful and watch everyone else's lives grow closer to God because of your kindness and your generosity. Bro?
They're also not sharing the wealth, and they're getting their wealth by fraud. They're not paying their workers, their whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
The laborer in the who did that work for you? Why aren't they getting a fair wage? They did the work. And even the New Testament shows some of the internal talks about, hey, laborer's worth of a hire. There's a lot of concepts there. There's some good in these principles and ideals that we kind of have to figure out, again, wisdom to balance to. And there's a context here. You have this attitude that you know what the future is going to be. You know how it's all going to play out. You've been squeezing the lemons dry, so dry that even your laborers don't have enough for them to fill your vats of lemonade. I'm just using that as the easiest metaphor for us. And yet, there's going to come a time when you don't want lemonade.